Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Today's a very special day, a very special stream. Today is Kubernetes' 10th birthday. Happy birthday,
Yeah.
Kubernetes.
I know. So does that mean I can finally call myself a senior Kubernetes engineer? Do I have enough
Absolutely.
experience yet? Or do we have to
You're
get to
missing a
that
2 years.
15-year mark?
I think it was 12 years or something like that, but we're almost there. Welcome, everyone, to the stream. Thank you for coming by. Today, we're going to dig into Namespace as a service. And one of the motivations behind this particular stream and even the concept of Namespace as a service is to hand off isolated boundaries to dev teams and operator teams to be able to build their own apps and deploy them into Kubernetes. You could spin up a namespace very easily, but then if you had to go out and create all the appropriate authorization mechanisms, the isolation boundaries for policy, that's a lot of manual work that you have to do. So this is where OpenUnison and Marc comes into the chat to help us out and figure that all out. Marc, why don't you tell us a little bit about the namespace as a service feature of OpenUnison and the backstory and history of how it came to be, and then we can dig into some of this stuff.
Yeah, so Kubernetes is a platform for building platforms, right? Like that's the famous Kelsey Hightower tweet or quote. And if you think about the way most platforms work, there is, you're handing something to somebody, right? You want to automate something. You want to make it so that you as the operator don't have to be involved every step of the way. And one of the things that became really clear to me when I first started working with Kubernetes is this is a system designed really well to handle multi-tenancy, to be able to create one platform that you can hand to multiple people. Now, 10 years ago when this first started, people were not saying that. I should have had the picture ready when we were sponsoring the first KubeCon that was in Seattle in 2016, where the vendor showcase was in the lobby of the Sheraton in downtown Seattle. We had our little pie stack of Kubernetes that was multi-tenant running OpenUnison. And there are a lot of reasons why you want to go with multi-tenancy, right? First off is cost. Every control plane costs money, whether you're paying out of pocket for a cloud's control plane, whether you're running it on existing hardware, even though modern control planes are for the most part containerized, so you're not running dedicated hardware for it, there's still a cost there. And so by increasing the number of control planes you have a cost in resources, you have a cost in management, you have a cost in auditing, all the different things that go into maintaining a cluster. So that's one. Two, you have a human cost. Let's face it, people who know Kubernetes really well are expensive. But there's a reason why it's in high demand. It's because it's an expensive thing to do. People want to have it on their resume because it's valuable. And that can be really difficult to find. So now if every single team, every single silo has their own cluster to run, now that means every team and every silo has to have their own Kubernetes people. Mm-hmm. And that can be problematic, especially when, 70 to 80% of that knowledge and work is all overlap. So, between the cost management, the team management, and then ultimately, getting to the place where you as a app owner have the benefits of control, while you as a cluster owner have the benefits of not having to deal with the app owners, mm-hmm. right? That self-service model. So there's a lot of reasons why multi-tenancy just really makes your life easier. Instead of upgrading 200 clusters, I upgrade one. Instead of upgrading 200 versions of Kiali, I upgrade one, right? And that, there's a lot of work that goes into that. But even once you do that work, the cost savings. I mean, I've got one customer that they did just quick back of the napkin work on how much they were spending on nodes that weren't being fully utilized. And switching to multi-tenancy just to get higher capacity on nodes saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars, just easily, like without even thinking too hard about it. Even once you get into the work of doing the work to make multi-tenancy happen, because it doesn't just happen at the throw of a switch.
No, that's fantastic of a backstory. I think it's also worth noting that, there are options and there are ways to achieve, I guess, that multi-tenancy too. And it's just really how you look at it and how you view it. What are some examples of ways to achieve that multi-tenancy today? And obviously we'll dig into OpenUnison and what it can do. But what are some of the ones that you've encountered across maybe the years that you've worked in the dev and container space?
Yeah, so I find there are a few different approaches that folks use. Some of them, a lot of times we'll do things that work, but turns out are probably anti-patterns. One of the big ones that I find a lot of is that in Kubernetes, you can have an admission controller do whatever you want, right? So there's nothing that says an admission controller has to just validate admission. So I've seen a lot of somebody creates a CRD via the API, and then the admission controller takes that CRD and does a bunch of stuff. Now that of course means that admission is now not repeatable, and you need to be very careful with that. So that's one way to do it. I don't particularly like that way. Another way to do it that I've seen is just like anything else in this business, custom workflows, stringing together, whether you're talking about Terraform, Pulumi, Ansible, Bash scripts, half a dozen scripts together and having it execute via whatever self-service interface you have. So sometimes it's Jenkins or some other CI/CD tool. Sometimes, you have something like a Backstage where everything is very custom built. And so that's approach number 2. The approach we take is, so Tremolo started off as a pure play identity management product. And so we built a workflow engine. And that workflow engine was really straightforward and simple. And it was primarily designed to work with identity. And what we found was that workflow engine actually worked really well to do automation tasks too. And so we said, okay, we already have this self-service management model. We have a portal where you can log in, request things. We have a way for you to build out forms. We have a way for, we have an API. It's all extensible. And then we're also tied into identity. So like we've done live streams where we've talked about how CI/CD integrates with identity, how pipelines integrate with identity. And what we found was, wait a second, we can hook into all of these systems securely. So we can either have the workflow that does the work, or we can kick off the workflow with valid identities that can then do a lot of the work. That maybe it's not the best thing for Tremolo to be doing the work, but there's some other tool. So like as an example, when we launch a vCluster in our Namespace as a service, we've done a couple of streams with Loft on this, and the 3rd edition of Kubernetes and Enterprise Guide, we're going to do this as well. When we launch the vCluster, instead of creating all the individual objects, we launch a Kubernetes job that runs the vCluster command. But we're securely injecting a token into that job, so that way the vCluster command is not using some static token to talk to a remote cluster. So it put us in a really interesting spot to be able to automate a lot of this. What we're finding a lot of is that customers are saying, hey, we love your APIs, but we want to integrate you into something else. We either have our own homegrown portal, we have our own homegrown system, or we're in the process of building that. And because we already have those APIs available, they're going from, okay, well, we'll just start with your thing, and then we'll move into what we have. So it gives them some future proofing as well. So I think it really gives a nice balance between, getting stuff done today versus what you want to do in the future.
No, that's a pretty good assessment of what's out there in the market. And we have a few people that have entered the chat. Hello, Sudhanshu. Thanks so much for coming by. Hello, Pradumna. Thank you so much for coming along. And there's a question here from Norio. Curious to know, does OU create and manage identities on its own, or does it need an external source like Okta to generate identity? So the short answer is you need some sort of external identity provider.
Nope. Nope. I mean, I know why you think that, Marino, because that's where we've spent most of our time. But we can, in fact, manage our own identities.
Well, like through the virtual directory, right?
No, even locally. Our largest deployments, which are not Kubernetes focused, we're a generic identity tool. We manage hundreds of thousands of identities. We'll manage them in a database. We'll manage them, whether it's a relational database, a document database, doesn't really matter to us. It doesn't have to be LDAP. But no, we can do that. We don't, in the Kubernetes world, we don't typically do that because we find it's easier to have an external interface. So perfect example, our favorite home lab tool, Cargo, right? When Kat first asked about, OpenUnison and how we could integrate that, because it's an enterprise tool for authentication, one of the things we kind of went back and forth on is, should OpenUnison give you a username and password, or should we expect people to come to the party with something? Now, in that scenario, we decided to go with GitHub, because we figured, home labbing, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have a GitHub account. You can use that pretty easily. But in actuality, we can say, and we've got demos of this that we've never really released. You know what? Register a user. We'll give you a password. We support passkeys and certificates and any other form of authentication you can think of out of the box. And, if you forget your password, we'll email you a link that you can reset it. It's just those things all requires additional infrastructure, right? How do you send that notification? How do you set those things up? So for the sake of simplicity, we tend not to go that route. But yeah, OpenUnison totally supports all those things that you would expect from a identity management system.
I appreciate that clarification. And you're absolutely right. Like, my focus has been just so around tying this to some sort of external provider that I didn't even think that there are other entities out there that don't need that external IDP. And
if there are folks watching the live stream, sorry to interrupt. If there are folks watching the live stream that do want that, because we have thought about that and what that might look like, please go to our GitHub repo, OpenUnison, github.com/OpenUnison/OpenUnison-Kate. Open up an issue, because a lot of the difficulty in building something like that is understanding where the users are coming from who want something like that. So we can absolutely do that. It's just a matter of figuring out what that would look like, how you would configure it, how you would get started, etc. Open source.
So I had a question for you. Do you have any documentation or visuals that help us maybe see how this all looks from a graphical standpoint?
I don't know that I have any diagrams, but if you go to the website, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So if you go to openunison.github.io, I think it's this one, right? Yeah. If you go to openunison.github.io, there is and we'll use this as our documentation. There's a namespace as a service section that kind of walks you through what our namespace as a service is, what our namespace as a service creates. Because if you think about what namespace as a service really means, there's the act of creating a namespace, right? It's Kubernetes. We all know how to create namespaces. Yay. But then how do you tie that to your identity provider, right? What are the roles? So, out of the box, we give you admin and view. Admin gives you basically carte blanche control over the namespace, except for objects that affect the rest of the cluster. So as an admin, as an example, you can't change a resource quota in your namespace. You can't create or delete a resource quota. And then view. But you can add additional roles too. So for instance, we've got a customer that their support staff, their level 1 support staff, needs to be able to go into the Kubernetes dashboard and delete pods, right? So they have a support role that has, view plus delete pods. That's easily added. But then think about this for a second. Once you've created a namespace and you've tied it to groups, how do you manage those groups? Right? How do you manage who has access to those groups? You as the cluster admin don't want to be in that scenario. So what we then do is we say, okay, now we need to create the management side of this. So we create an approval group. The requester is the first person in that approval group. So now we've given you not only a self-service interface for creating the namespace, but also managing access to said namespace. Now, we do have 2 models for how we can go. The first model is what we call internal self-service groups. So the idea is that you're just authenticating to your remote system. But ultimately, it's you as the cluster owner hold the keys to the kingdom. You have the operations. And so you own those groups. And authorization is often, something you want to be closer to the business. In this case, the cluster operator. So the nice thing about that is you have control. The downside to that approach is with that control requires audit policies and reporting and all that fun stuff. We give you all that out of the box. The second model is external groups. So in our last live streams, we tied RBAC directly to an Okta group, right? So the question is, okay, can I take my groups from Okta or Active Directory or my teams from GitHub, whatever? If I can include that in my RBAC, why can't I use that to manage access to namespaces? So in this model, that's exactly what we do. We say, okay, tell us what groups map to certain things, and we'll go ahead and perform all that mapping for you. And the really great thing about this model is it lets you drive namespace management without any approvals. Right? Once the namespace, once the tenant gets approved, you don't have to manage access anymore. That all happens from your corporate identity system. The downside to this approach is it all gets managed by your corporate identity system. So the third model, and this is the one that I find most of our customers and users land on, is the hybrid model. And in the hybrid management model, you're doing both. And the reason for that is you've got the external management for your 80/20, right? You're able to onboard, you're able to leverage that. But, you quickly need an expert who maybe isn't a member of a specific group to get access to something to be able to debug. Your corporate identity probably isn't fast enough. It rarely is. So you turn both on, and now you get the best of both worlds. And I will say that almost every customer I have has started with internal, asked for external with no internal. We switch them over to external. And then within a few weeks, they say, can we have both? And we say, yep. And we switch on both. So that's the typical kind of model I see happening.
So so the approval process can be automated, right? So, and is like when we are about to create the namespace, is it like manual or that too can be automated? Like when we are
Everything's automated. So
okay.
at no point in the process does anybody actually create a names like kube control create, right? And we'll see this once we get into. We actually do have a nice little manual here. Good
Because I
documentation.
saw that there's a portal from where we can like create the namespace. So I assume that we have to do it manually, but then it's a tedious thing to do if we are not automating that process. So that's why I was clarifying.
Right. So we're going to requesting a new namespace. So this is what we're going to show off today, where you're going to go ahead and go to the form, and this is ClickOps, but people like ClickOps. It works really well, especially in the enterprise world, to kick off that process. Now, that said, the system's very easily customizable. You can disable approvals if you want, especially if you're going to do, we've had customers that have, for example, said, you know what, we're only going to do external authorization. Everything's inside of our AD. So we don't need approvals. Like we don't want it. We've got other customers who have said, you know what, we want to do approvals based on capacity. So if our capacity is at a certain percentage, then we want there to be an approval. But otherwise, just let it go through. We don't really need to care about it. Some of the other things that we can do are, especially, we're an enterprise-focused company. So a lot of times enterprises want to know things like chargeback information. So you can add additional attributes here to request and pull that data from different places. So you can say, hey, I'm coming from this business unit. These are the people who you're going to charge back to. And then you can also customize your approvals so that maybe it doesn't go to the cluster admin. Maybe it goes to a business owner that has to approve a cost. We can also do interesting things like, you know what, you're using Backstage or using Snow for your interface, call our APIs instead of using this portal at all. It's all customizable. It's all very flexible. I think one of the things that folks find about our approach to multi-tenancy is it's very imperative, right? Like, I know we're in Kubernetes and we want to do everything in a declarative way, but most complex systems are not easily defined in a declarative way. They're very flexible. That it depends on what the case is that you're going with. So there has to be a lot of flexibility to be able to make those imperative decisions, and that's why our approach seems to be a good kind of middle of the road.
Okay, so how do you think the ability to write the objects directly to the API or the Git repository, which is an important thing which OpenUnison offers, which enhances the flexibility of the namespace creation process?
Yeah, so that's a great point. One of the really cool things that we do is we can talk to the API server, and we know how to do that. But we also know how to talk to Git on your behalf. So if I pull up here, applications, Kubernetes integration. So this is an example of our workflow objects. And we're saying here to create a Kubernetes object. And there are two ways we can do this. We can either write it directly to the API server via the Kubernetes API, right? APIs, yay. But I love GitOps, you love GitOps, we all love GitOps, right? Mm-hmm. And so the other option is say, okay, well, let's write it to a Git repository. So we give you the tools to be able to do that. So here we're writing a template. We have this thing called write to request, and right now it's false because it's the simple way to go. We switch that to true, and we say, okay, over the course of the workflow, let's accumulate all of these objects we're writing into this buffer inside of the request. And then once that's done, we're going to go ahead and push that information into Git. So we give you another task that says, okay, push it into Git, right? And so we use an SSH key to push everything into Git. And then because you probably have more stuff to do, you now have to sit and wait until your GitOps controller kicks in. So we give you a way to wait for the status. So we're giving you that flexibility to go either way, where you can talk to the API server or push things into Git, and gives you a lot of flexibility. And the nice thing is it's the same tasks. So, you start off talking to the API server because, GitOps is not as easy as we'd all like to think it is. And then you move to GitOps when you're ready to, and you're using the same workflows.
That answers my question. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Are we ready to get into the configurations and getting it up and running?
I think so. I'm ready to have some fun. Are you?
Yep. All right. So what do I need? Let me go ahead and share, I guess, my terminal. We can start there.
Yeah. So the namespace as a service requires 2 additional components. Technically it requires 3, but we bundle one in for you. The first additional component is we need a relational database. So the relational database serves a few roles. One, or I guess really 2 roles. One is it stores all of your authorization information, especially for internal. Even when we do external, the way that we handle external is by synchronizing your external identity information into groups that we then use in RBAC binding. So one of the big differences between OpenUnison Namespace as a service and what we did in the previous live streams is you don't take your original group name and put them in an RBAC binding. We create a buffer group, so to say, that you can then use to, or that you would then include in your binding, and then we maintain that synchronization for you. So that's role 1. Role 2, it stores audit data. So every time something changes, you write something, you change something, something gets approved, that gets stored in the database. And then finally, state management. This is an asynchronous process. We need to be able to store that process data somewhere, so that gets stored in the database. So that's what the database does. Then you need some way to notify people, right? Like, hey, Marina, if somebody in your cluster has requested access, go do something about it, right?
That's where the SMTP part comes in.
Yep. So out of the box, we handle SMTP. We do have hooks to support other providers. We haven't gotten there because honestly, most enterprises, even in the age of Slack and Teams, just say, just send us an email. But that's the second component. And those can be a bit of a pain in a live stream. So we give you in the documentation where we walk through the namespace as a service, we actually have 2 things for you. We have a MariaDB database that is just like, okay, this is as simple as it gets. Deploy it. You're good to go. And then we have something called an SMTP black hole. So the idea is that I just need something that's going to take the email so I don't get errors in my logs, but it goes directly into the bit bucket. It never actually gets forwarded anywhere. So the first thing you should do is deploy the testing MariaDB. And because you're live streaming, I'm just going to send that link to you.
I think I'm looking at the testing MariaDB section of the namespace as a service in the docs.
Okay, so just do a kube control create, and
it's called NS black hole.
Well, that's the black hole one, but the MariaDB, the testing MariaDB, is a YAML for deploying MariaDB as a stateful set.
Got it.
and then go ahead and do the steps for the black hole.
Got it. All right.
That's for the SMTP, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we're creating a new namespace, and we're creating a deployment called black hole with this SMTP black hole. So basically, you're just sending all your messages to this null destination.
Yeah. So it makes testing a lot easier, because otherwise you end up getting all these errors in the logs, and it's a real pain. This just makes it easier to be able to do that.
So
and we maintain that.
Okay. So if I was using Microsoft Exchange, right, because that's probably me being on premises and I don't want to use the cloud and I've got to deploy Windows Server and all that stuff like that. What kind of configuration changes would I make here, or how would I make this a little bit more oriented towards that?
Hold on to that because we'll come back to it.
Okay, cool. All
yeah,
right, cool. Done. All right.
Okay, so we have our database. We have our SMTP, right? So the next thing we need to do is go ahead and update our values.yaml. So I believe you had it from last time.
Yep, I'm going to pull that up in a second. So I'm going to present. All right.
Okay. Now, what's interesting about this values.yaml is because we pulled this out of Helm, it actually has all the configuration options. And it is much larger. Yeah. If you compare this to the default values.yaml we give you on the website, there's a lot more going on here than there is there. And the reason for that is we build out, there's so much customizability that it would be overwhelming if we gave you a blank slate. So we said, okay, this is our 80-20 on what we think you're going to run into for most implementation. So like, as an example, a third component that you're going to need is a message bus. And we use message buses to be able to do high availability as part of our asynchronous workflows. Out of the box, we bundle ActiveMQ with OpenUnison. That's what we're going to deploy today. But we've got customers on Azure Message Bus, Service Bus is what they call it, on Amazon SQS. So you can use any of those that we certify on. As long as it's JMS, in theory, it'll work. But out of the box, we come with AMQ, and we're going to stick with that for now just to make our lives easy. And then some of the other things you're going to see throughout that configuration file is that you won't see in the default one is there's a massive section on new namespace, right? What are the attributes? What are the roles? What are the default roles? So you can customize that and add all sorts of stuff to it. You just don't have to. So to get started, usually we say start with what you get by default and then think through how you want your onboarding to go. So the first thing we're going to do is, so you found SMTP. So this is where you would make changes based on your SMTP server. And I can see you're updating it already with what we have in the configuration. So, I know it's the year of our Lord 2024. It's amazing how many organizations still don't require TLS for SMTP. But there it is, or authentication. So it's not that strange. The next section is the database. You've got that updated. So one thing I want to call out here is MySQL and MariaDB very recently have diverged. MariaDB has kind of given up on its compatibility with MySQL. And so it's important to make sure that if you are going to use MariaDB, you have to use the MariaDB specific configuration.
Okay.
So those are the first two things that you do. That said, we support other databases. Honestly, probably our largest database is SQL Server.
SQL Server.
No,
okay.
SQL Server. Yeah, because enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Microsoft Yeah. And how enterprise are we? We support Kerberos to SQL Server, where you can actually you can actually mount a Kerberos key tab into the namespace, and we'll use that instead of a password. That's how enterprise we are.
Raise your hand if you've ever deployed Microsoft SQL Server before.
No one wants to admit it, but yeah. Although, hey, SQL Server runs on Linux now, which still makes my brain hurt thinking about. But so we've got that part down. So now we get to the NaaS models. And
So we don't need to update the OpenUnison section though.
We're getting it. We're walking through it. Yeah. So first off, we're just going to use the internal groups because that's just easier. So to turn on the internal groups with service, look for the NaaS section, NaaS. Keep going.
There we go.
There we go. All right. So there's a lot of stuff in here that we can ignore. We want to look for the section in groups. And then under groups, there's a section called internal. There's internal. Yep. 176.
Yeah, there's internal. Yes.
All right. So you've already got internal is true. Okay, good. And then that's the only one we need to enable there. And then that's for Okta if we want to do that later. Did I miss a step? Deploying your NaaS. Yeah, I always miss this step. Okay, so then the next thing we got to do is look in the non_secret_data section. Okay, so see where it says show portal orgs is false? We're going to change that to true. So what this does is when you log into OpenUnison, instead of just seeing the list of badges, we're actually going to have a tree with organizations and different badges in it. So that gives us the ability to break up the badges, and it also makes it easier for us to only show badges based on what you're allowed to see.
Okay.
Then there should be a attribute called role_attribute. Is that in there? Okay. Change that from groups to portal groups with the G uppercase. And then
so before you continue, remind me again, what is this one section for? The role attributes portal groups.
So what we're doing now is we're customizing the way OpenUnison shows things.
Okay.
So in the standard OpenUnison that you deploy, we just take the groups and we display it. Here we're being a little smarter, where we're saying, okay, instead of showing you the raw group information, because that doesn't really tell you a lot, we break it down into and say, okay, if you're logging into the web interface, you have this permission in this namespace on this cluster. So we're telling it to look at a different group to do that. And then there should be a section, or there should be something, look for RJSON. AREJSON.
Sorry, RJ.
ARE. The word R.
There we go.
Okay, so change that to true.
True. Okay.
And then there should be a enable_provisioning. Change that to true. And then see where it says enable_activeMQ is true? Go ahead and add a new line underneath that. Nope, we still want that to be true. But we're going to also add, hold on a second. We are going to add You don't have this because I actually decided to recently update this to make it the default. ActiveMQ _ use _ PVC true. I'm sending it to you in the private chat.
Sweet. Okay. Is that a indentation
Nope.
or no?
Nope. So what we're saying here is ActiveMQ can run in one of two modes. It can either use the database for its data store, or it can use a PVC. We originally, when we first went live with this tool, was using a database because, if you're deploying locally, you might not have a way to provision. Storage is hard, right? And the problem with that approach is that the way that ActiveMQ does its table locking can actually balloon your logs and flood your database logs. And so even though OpenUnison needs maybe a meg in database, megabyte, right? You could probably fit the database on a floppy disk. Kid, if you don't know what a floppy disk is, ask her grandparents at this point. But we would run into disk space issues on multi-gigabytes because this locking is just filling it up. So use the PVC, makes your life easier. And then I think that's it. I think that's the last configuration step. So the last thing you need to do is, go ahead and copy that to where you're going to work with your cluster.
Yeah, so I just need to save the file, and then we're going to rerun OUCTL, right?
Yep, but we've got to create two new files. You got to create a file with your password, and that's going to be a very super secret password that'll tell you. And then, we can actually just reuse that for SMTP because it doesn't actually care about the password.
Okay.
So this is actually in the YAML that I had sent, that you had used for MariaDB. But notice there are two T's there.
Okay. Oh, that's
what makes it. That's what makes it secure.
Yeah.
I do security. I'm an expert.
If you added a space in there too, you'd really probably trip up the system.
The number one problem I run into is people using Echo to create the text file or a secret and not realizing that extra carriage return is in there. And you have no idea how many times I've spent debugging that. So go ahead and save that file. Doesn't matter.
Well, okay, we'll call it pass.
Yeah, it's just you don't ever want to actually type in a password into the console. So you put it into a file and let it get right in.
And then what's the next file that we're gonna?
We're just gonna reuse that twice. Technically, you would do the same thing for your SMTP server, but because there is no password, you just put a dummy one, and you're good to go. So we're ready to deploy.
So I don't need to create a second file.
No, we'll just use that one twice.
Okay, cool. All right, let me just reshare. Cool. All right.
So first thing you want to do, pull down the latest repos. So Helm repo update. Okay.
Cool.
So now we're going to run the OU control command. So we're going to do install auth portal.
Mm-hmm.
The difference here is we need to add a couple of command line switches. Okay. So we need to tell OU control where that database file is. So it's going to be dash. Let me double check because I don't remember. OU control install auth portal. So dash B as in boy, and then the path to that file you created. and then dash T as in Tom, same thing. And then the path to your values file.
What did I call it? What did I call it? Oh, NaaS as a service. That's why. There we go. Okay.
Rock and roll.
I don't know why I was hesitating there. I was like, is this going to
So
work?
this time the OU control command is going to do all the same stuff it did before, but it's going to run an extra chart. So a couple of things are happening here that didn't happen before. First off, it's deploying ActiveMQ. It's creating a PVC. It's deploying ActiveMQ. So this is going to take a little bit longer because ActiveMQ needs to fire up, and it takes a minute. And then the other thing it's doing is once it's done deploying the charts, there's an additional chart that gets deployed called cluster management. And this is what adds the actual NaaS functionality to OpenUnison.
Okay. And I'm going to just open up another screen so I can watch it.
Yeah, this is a good time to have a chat because this will probably take a few minutes. So if you've got questions, you want to ask anything, now would be a good time.
Yeah, if anyone wants to ask any questions here in the chat, feel free to. If there's something that you're attempting to do with, your enterprise environment and you need something like this, ask away. This is why Marc's here. This is why we bring the experts.
Yeah, so I had one question. So I've gone through the doc and I saw that OpenUnison handles the day 2 operations like the resizing quota and providing access to namespaces without using the kubectl command. So how does it do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we haven't productized it yet. Hold on a second. If that's pending, there's a problem. Look at the OpenUnison operator log.
It didn't restart. Do you see how it's still 65 days old?
That's okay. That's not a problem. Yeah, I want to look at the operator because if AMQ is in a pending state at this point, that usually means that something didn't happen correctly inside of the operator. That's orchestra. I want to look at the actual operator.
Oh, oops, wrong one. There we go.
Scroll up. Okay, there's the problem. All right. Could not connect to MariaDB.MariaDB.
Is it the namespace where it's deployed to?
Yeah, go ahead and let's check the MariaDB.
Was it deployed to OpenUnison or?
No, it's in the MariaDB namespace. All right, so it looks like the stateful set didn't start. MariaDB didn't start. That's interesting. See why that pod's in a pending state? Probably because the PVC didn't get created. So the question is, why didn't the PVC get created? Timed out, waiting for, what are we on? We're on SIVO, right?
Mm-hmm.
So SIVO's not generating PVCs. That's annoying. If we need to, we can go with the plan B, but I'd rather not.
I should see a volume come up, right, within Sivo.
Yeah. What I don't know is why you're not seeing one come up. Did you hit some kind of quota in your account?
I don't think so. Can double check. Pending. Sivo volume.
Yeah.
Manage settings. Quota. Ha!
You got a quota? Go delete some stuff.
Ah.
This is how you know it's a live stream, folks, and it isn't all just rehearsed and rehearsed, and because things break in real life, right?
I have this.
If something ever works right the first time, don't trust it ever.
Yeah. That's why I love doing live streams, right? Because one, we go back in time a little bit and realize, like, hey, there's some basics that we have to resolve. Storage. If we're out of physical capacity, how the heck is this thing going to create a volume and attach it?
That's never happened to me before. By the way. I'm a little ashamed of you, Marino. I'm not going to lie.
You know what though? Okay, all right. I deserve that. So I'm actually curious if I rerun the OUCTL command, will that re-kick up everything again? It should, right?
Well, first delete the volumes, get MariaDB healthy, and then we'll rerun OU control.
Right. Okay, so let's delete.
We have one question from Sudhanshu though. So Marc, you can answer that. Are there ways to use OpenUnison with other systems apart from Git, like say Subversion or Mercurial?
Subversion, wow, blast from the past. I'll
be right back.
In theory, yes. We don't support it today, but if that's something that you want, go ahead and open up a feature request and we can certainly talk about it. I mean, the nice thing is that, it would be a task, right? Like all the same stuff would be true. And then we would just say, okay, instead of push to Git, it would be push to Subversion, push to Mercurial. Now, Subversion, you're probably doing over SSH from what I remember. It's so long since I've done Subversion. And I'll be honest, I've never used Mercurial. But, as long as you don't ask for CVS, I think we'll be okay. I'm not talking about the drugstore. How are we doing with MariaDB? Marino, did it come back? Did it come up?
No, he's not here.
You might need to reapply that because you deleted the claim, which means you're going to need to reapply that original test.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see where it's hiding. This one right here, right?
Yep. You're going to probably need to, that'll work too. That should work. Do you create the PVC? Oh, because the PVC is created as a template from the stateful set. So if you scale the stateful set down to 0, scale back up to 1, it should recreate the
What? Oh, yeah. It probably helps if I actually add the name.
Yeah.
Okay.
They haven't yet tried to integrate AI directly into Kubernetes. Yet. Figuring that's going to be the keynote at KubeCon, and or they're going to talk about it at our at the birthday party tonight.
Oh, they're doing the birthday party in.
We only want one replica though. Scale that back down to one because if If you have multiple replicas, you're going to cause all sorts of havoc.
Okay,
all right,
it's
cool.
running now.
All right, now we should be able to rerun OU control. You have more than one volume available, and you haven't hit the quota again, have you?
No, I'm
Because
gonna.
we're going to end up provisioning another quota.
No, but I'm gonna double check something quickly just to make sure we don't run into that problem again. Oh yeah, I've got plenty. Okay, we're good to go. As long as we're not provisioning like terabytes of storage.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, go ahead and run OU control again.
Somewhere here. There we go. It's not even lunchtime and I'm starving. I'm thinking about like, what am I going to make myself for lunch for today?
This is what we want to see.
Nice. So we started doing this meal delivery thing where they send you like pre-cooked meals and all you got to do is throw it in the microwave, and it's worked out really well, only because like by the time my partner gets home, I'm exhausted, she's exhausted, and Krishna's just chaotic. So just can't seem to,
As it should be.
Yeah. So it's always fun.
Yeah, we looked at doing those, and what we ended up finding when we looked at them was that the meals that we wanted were basically all Asian meals, because Asian cooking has so many ingredients, right? And the issue with a lot, at least personally for me, so I'm a type 2 diabetic, and especially Southeast Asian and Far East Asian has a lot of sugar that people don't realize in it. You go to the cheap stuff, was it the Panda Bear place?
Panda Express.
Panda Express. You might as well be eating a bar of chocolate, right? There's just so much added sugar in there, and so we ended up finding that it wasn't worth it for us. But we definitely wanted to go down that route. It's actually kind of nice because I've been finding a lot of, especially Thai food, because I love peanut butter. I love Thai food. A lot of recipes now I'm finding to be able to make, it's not as good if you go to a Thai restaurant, but it's a good enough facsimile that kind of scratches that itch.
Yeah, no, I feel that too. Sometimes we can never really replicate that Thai food at home, like despite all of our efforts, and we just end up getting takeout. And there's a few good places that we still have to drive to. It's probably about 20 minutes away to get to a really good place, because all the places close by are just like, they do like Hakka food and then Thai food and then like different kinds of, it's just and it's not very specific to just Thai, right?
Yeah.
So I get you.
Yeah, they opened up a place called Honey Grow. It's a U.S. Northeast chain.
Okay.
And it's like a 5-minute delivery for us, and is so dangerous because the food is so good. It's all kinds of different stir fry. It's not just Thai food, but they've got a red curry that is just like, oh my God, it's amazing. All right, so now that everybody's hungry, hopefully we didn't chase everyone off. So if we look in the OpenUnison namespace, you're going to find we have a couple of extra things.
All right, let's see what we have here.
We've got this extra deployment for AMQ. that is up and running. So that's going to be our message bus. The version you have deployed right now is not HA. It is not designed for production. It's designed to get you going. We are releasing an HA version
Nice.
that will give you that HA. The trick is, though, that you need a read, write, many PVC.
Mhm.
So it's a little tricky. But if you have a cloud-based one or something, a lot of enterprises will have services for message buses. That's a pretty common thing. So
hold on. Let's pause for
Yep.
a second, because I think it's worth an explanation of why the read write many and the high availability and some of the challenges around that. A long time ago, if you ever worked in the virtualization space, one of the cool things that you could do is you could share storage across all of your nodes, across all of your hypervisor hosts. But one of the challenges was if one of those nodes was writing to that same, what we call LUN, you had to put a lock on it so that others wouldn't overwrite those same set of blocks that you were writing on top of. Now, that concept of read write many is very similar, because that's what we're effectively doing. We've got one instance of MariaDB right now going on, which is writing to that PVC. But if we had a secondary instance and it didn't know what that first instance was writing, then you would have this overlap, this stepping on toes. We want to prevent that. That's where the read write many piece comes in. And so there's a lock that is put in place on that PVC so that it prevents overwriting of data in that particular volume altogether. And it's kind of like phenomenal that we still deal with these challenges today. And I'm curious, like, why do we have a particular dependency on a singular volume when we have to like shard our database or split it up or create some sort of high availability approach?
I think that I think the short answer to that is things are not as cloud native as they appear. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's like that scene in Jurassic Park where they're driving away from the Tyrannosaurus Rex and they're looking in the rearview mirror. It says objects are closer than they appear, and the Rex says, getting ready to eat them. Yeah. It's kind of the opposite of that, right? Things are not as cloud native as they appear. At the end of the day, it's like the those snarky, like, and I used to have this sticker, I'll admit, there is no cloud, it's just someone else's computer. Right? Like we've layered APIs on top of shit that, like you said, pardon my French, has existed for decades. Right? And so that didn't go away. Right? Like I know for me personally, one of the most eye-opening moments I had when I first started working with Kubernetes back in my day was one of my first commercial customers for this product was a hedge fund in the UK. And one of the things that they wanted me to add was the ability to automate the mounting of a SMB mount into their pods and to automate that. And I was like, okay, I can figure this out. And going into that, I had never really worked with storage. It was just some kind of magical thing. I said, hey, I need storage. And it just worked. Dumb app developer over here. And I asked, I started looking into this, and I just kind of always assumed that Kubernetes knew how to talk these native protocols. Like when you mounted NFS, like I just assumed Kubernetes knew how to talk the NFS protocol, right? Like that's how in my brain that worked. And then once I started to get into it, like, wait, this is just a volume mounted on the node? That's it? Really? And like, I don't know if you remember this, Maria, but remember back in the day before we had CSI and you could do, what was it?
Like iSCSI targets?
Huh?
You could just do iSCSI targets directly to the nodes or something?
No, it was where you would just specify a bash file to do the mount. They deprecated it like 5 years ago. But that's what we were doing. Where we would have this, and it's going to drive me up a wall now, and hopefully there's somebody on the stream that remembers what these things were called. But you would just say, okay, to mount this volume type, here's the executable, and you'd have a daemon set that would deploy the executable to each one. And so we said, okay, this is going to call the Samba commands to mount. This is going to do the KInit and the stuff to do Kerberos and mount. So, it was this like aha moment where I was like, Kubernetes is just Linux. That's all it is. It's just an API on top of Linux. So why do we still care about these things? Because these things never really went away. It's just, we don't have to think about it as much anymore.
I just think Kubernetes, as powerful as it is a combination of labels, aliases, and a bunch of bash behind the scenes that we just cannot see, and it's all wrapped in Go. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's
until
funny
somebody
because...
says they're going to rewrite it in Rust. That'll be Kubernetes 2.0.
All right.
Legit hard way.
All right. So
everything's deployed.
Yep.
So now go ahead and log into your OpenUnison, and we're going to see some differences.
Okay, let me get an incognito window going because I want to make sure that we're doing this without the harassment of cookies and cache and hash.
The cause and solution to all life's problems. Unfortunately for me, it's usually the internet cookies that are the cause and the edible cookies that are my solution.
All right, K8's OU. Sign in with Google. Let's see if Google.
No, this is the one that I think didn't work. Did you fix this?
I can't remember how did we get in? Did we end up using a?
You ended up creating a local account inside of your Okta instance.
Okay, let me double check what that local account is because I probably forgot.
There's something about kubectl.
Oh. Okay, yeah, I probably don't remember it. It was 7 days ago. I can't even remember what I ate for dinner last night.
That was 7 days ago? I thought that was 7 months ago. I am still in a time warp. Like I feel like I've been in a constant time warp probably since 2020. Especially when Google is like, remember this day, 4 years ago? I was like, that was 4 years ago. I'm just gonna crawl into a coffin. Thanks. I forget who it was. Somebody had on Twitter. Somebody posted a picture of these chairs that looked like coffins. Like it was high back and it had the coffin thing over you, and so it was like if somebody had molded a coffin to a chair. It was like, sometimes when I feel really old, I feel like I should have one.
I'm doing this wrong. I gotta do this.
Yeah, you gotta do it directly into Okta.
All right, now
All right. So we got a few changes here, right? So we've got that pretty new Kubernetes, but I'm actually going to tell you to go click on. Notice that there are no tokens and there's no dashboard.
Yeah.
So you've got an option there called local deployment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where your tokens and your dashboard are. Now go click on your account information in the upper left-hand corner. So notice here, we don't just have a list of groups anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're the first person, you won. You're the winner. You're the administrator. You're going to be the one that all the requests go to. Congratulations. This is where
signed myself up
you was supposed to have the yay, you're in charge now. So we automated that because usually the first person to set it up is the first one who should have administrative rights. So we mark you as an internal administrator and as a local deployment administrator. Now, the reason why we call this the local deployment, you can customize this in the values.yaml, is OpenUnison is designed to do multi-cluster management. We definitely won't have time for that today, maybe another live stream. But the idea is that we can not just manage one local environment, we can help you manage all your clusters. So that said, go back to home. And now, even before we do that, click on OpenUnison Management. So we also give you access to the ActiveMQ console. So if you click on that, it didn't work. Oops. All right. Worry about that later. So go ahead and close that tab. So let's go ahead and click on Create New Kubernetes Namespace. So choose your cluster, a local deployment, give your namespace a name. And you need a reason, right? We got to keep the auditors happy.
There we go.
Okay. So now if we had real email set up, Marino would be getting an email right now saying, hey, somebody's asked for a new namespace. So go close this tab and hit the refresh button. So now you see this open approvals thing, but don't click anything yet.
Okay.
Click on reports. That wasn't there before.
Oh, interesting.
We have a bunch of reports here, and you can actually see all sorts of fun things. But go back to Kubernetes Enterprise. Go back to the top.
Oops.
Or no, go back to your. Click on reports.
Dang it.
No.
One second.
What are you doing? No, you don't have to re-authenticate. This is because you hit backspace too many times. That's actually going to fail. Just go to KTOU like you're logging in for the first time.
Yeah, there we go.
You still have your code. Okay, click on reports. And then see where it says My Open Requests?
Yep.
Go ahead and run that. So now you as the user know who you need to go bug. Because it lists who the approvers are. Right? Go back to reports. And click on Audit Reports. And see changelog for period. Click on that one. So pick your begin date, do yesterday to tomorrow, just to be clear. So this is all that audit data. So this was when you first logged in, we kept track of all the attributes that we changed of you in the database. So our enterprise users will get this data in one of two ways. They'll either go into the database to look it up, and reports are easy. But also, we're pushing the same information into the logs, so they'll also dump it into their Splunk or OpenSearch or whatever they're using. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So the last thing I'm going to have you do is, before you go ahead and approve the namespace, see how there's a little users button underneath reports?
Yep.
So go ahead and click the button next to first name on all the way to the left and type in your name.
Is that case
Click
sensitive?
search. I don't think so. Depends on the database. Maybe it is.
Maybe it's not that one.
Maybe that's not your actual first name.
There
You
go.
go. So now click on any of the, click on, yep. So it'll actually show you the information, right? Go ahead and close this out. Then click on Add to Cart. So this is where you as an administrator can go ahead and run workflows against this user. So if you click on, for instance, Kubernetes administration, if you wanted to make yourself a cluster administrator, which you already are because you were the first user, you could run this, and you could also do a pre-approval. So there's a lot of flexibility here in what you can do. So go ahead and go back to the open approvals. And this is where you can act on the request. So this is where you as the owner are able to decide whether to approve the request. And this is the most simple way, but you can do all sorts of different things. And then you get the information about what the current role is. We can configure what attributes are available. So for instance, you can see they're asking for the local deployment on the current namespace. But let's say you wanted to include chargeback information as the approver, you could see that. So this is all very customizable. So when you go to act on the request, you got to say why you're approving it. Now, we're probably not going to have time today, but you can customize this. So I don't want to have to provide the justification, or I want a pick list of justifications, right? All customizable. So go ahead and give a reason for why you want to approve it.
Okay.
And then you got to confirm your approval. So we're now off to the races. If we look at the Kubernetes logs, we're going to see a bunch of stuff get created. But here's the cool thing. Go to your dashboard. So go to local deployment, home, local deployment, Kubernetes dashboard.
Ooh, this is interesting. I see what's going on. Okay.
So now go to the namespace. We should have a tremolo. Everything went well. Yep.
Nice.
So now there's nothing in there.
Yeah,
right?
we haven't done anything, right?
But go to the role bindings. That's cluster role bindings. Role bindings. One more down.
There we
Right? So now we have a role binding. So now go back to OpenUnison. So go back to the previous screen.
Hold on. Let's just take a look at this. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Back at OpenUnison. All right.
Yep. So click on request access. And then see where there's a little arrow next to local deployment. Open that up and click on administrators. So notice that as new namespaces get created, a Concha could log in and request access. And because Marino, you are the first approver, you're the person who requested the namespace, you as the business owner, so not you as the cluster owner, but you as the business owner, now have the ability to approve that access. At the same time, if you logged in and said, I want to request access on a Concha's behalf, now everything's just in time. So, a Concha would have to log in first, but I want to request it on a Concha's behalf, you can do that. How many kube control commands have you run so far?
Maybe
exactly.
None.
Here's the next fun part. Click on reports. Okay, click on audit reports. Click on completed approvals.
Let's go to yesterday to tomorrow.
Yes, auditor, here is who approved it. You're no longer diving through the email shuffle, of having to figure out who approved what. It's all right there. And of course, auditors are, speaking as a former auditor, quick export to Excel, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to give them direct access to these reports, which you could if you wanted to, but let's say you just wanted to generate it and send it to them. I don't know if you have Excel on here, but it'll generate an XLSX, and there you go.
Is there an option to generate a CSV file?
Not right now, no.
Okay.
We found that the XLSX was the most sought after by the cogity old auditor crew.
All right, I see it.
So, it's generating a ton of valuable data, right? Now go back to users and then search for yourself again. And put the little check mark next to, you got to check it off. You got to put in the whole thing. We don't have wildcard working right there. So now click on your name again. And notice that we have your role for that namespace in there.
Interesting.
Now, this is like the most bare bones you can get, right? Like, this is not real multi-tenancy, right? Because you can be a really noisy neighbor, right? You can deploy whatever you want and crash a cluster right now. So there needs to be extension points. There needs to be ways for you to now customize this further. So if we look at our docs, can I present?
Yeah. Let me stop. I'll stop sharing. Go ahead.
Let me present. This is it, right? So if you look at our docs, and this is an area where we're working really hard right now to get everything updated. Oops, wrong one. Documentation. Customize the NaaS onboarding workflow. So our docs have an example here of probably the first thing you want to do is add resource quotas, right? Like if you're going to have a tenant, the first thing you want to do is make sure, okay, there is a standard set of resource quotas that, to make sure that you're not a noisy neighbor. And so here we wrote a workflow in OpenUnison's workflow language that says we're going to create a resource quota. And what's important here is that, we've got a way to be able to plug in which cluster we're working on, because we could be working on multiple clusters, what namespace it is, and then if we're using Git or not. Easy enough. And then once we've done that, we've got these hooks. So one of the things we can do is say, once we've created that object inside of OpenUnison, by just doing, kube control create F, right? That's just a Kubernetes object, CRD. We would then update our values.yaml to say, call that workflow after you're done creating the namespace. Bam, you now have your resource quotas. Place to deploy your network policies. And there are also ways that you can integrate with other systems. So like you can do a pre-run workflow. That pre-run workflow could create a Git repo, right? So if you're talking to, we have built-in integrations with GitHub and GitLab, right? We did that with the, we talked about that with the STS live stream, right? You could have a workflow that says, all right, I've approved this resource, I've approved this tenant, go provision a repo in Git so that to tie everything together where all the YAML live. Build it right into your onboarding process. And then the way that you write these workflows is we've got these different tasks. We've got a bunch of built-in tasks, and the docs have those. But then we have what we call custom tasks. Most of our tasks are considered custom tasks. You can write a custom task in JavaScript if you need to. But a lot of the times, you can do most of what you need with our existing custom tasks. So like if we're working with Kubernetes here, provision an object. This is provisioning a service account, right? And this is where we talked about being able to provision to Git or directly to the API. So this is where you start building it up and saying, okay, we're going to build it up more and more. You can also do things, and we're updating the docs with, like we said before, adding annotations to your namespace that gets provisioned based on the attributes. That one is often important because a lot of folks do reporting based on and security based on annotations in an attribute or in a namespace because that's a cluster level object. So being able to customize that, being able to customize what roles are available, what attributes are available. There's so much power in what you can do here. So this is really just your starting point. This isn't where the journey ends, but you've now got this place to begin your multi-tenancy journey. And then the other nice thing is because everything is YAML for the most part, once you get to this point, you're not restarting OpenUnison to test things and to do your debugging. So like the way I usually do this with customers is I'll create an additional Helm chart with all of my custom workflows. And the OU control command actually has a switch that says, go ahead and deploy these additional Helm charts to integrate it. Or we haven't released it yet, but I've written a Pulumi program to automate the deployment. So that becomes another way that you can automate. So there's a lot of power and flexibility here. This is where you start. This isn't where you finish.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so is there anything else we need to showcase from the environment, or have we kind of hit all the high points of that namespace as a service?
The only other thing I'd kind of like to show, I know we're coming up to an hour and a half here, but I think people would really enjoy it, is let's hook it up to Okta to be able to list groups in your new namespace.
So how would I go about doing that?
All right, so go to your values.yaml. I'm going to stop sharing.
One second, I gotta relocate some windows here. All right.
So let's go ahead and there's going to be a section called external : Okay, so keep going. Right there. Okay, so change that enabled to true. Okay, and then see where it says admin_group is CN equals OpenUnison admins, CN equals users, yada, yada, yada. Let's change that to change that to OU-admin. And then cluster admin group, we're going to change that to Kate's-admin. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is when we create a new namespace, I hate asking people to type things in. That is the easiest way for things to not work correctly. The benefit of ClickOps is that you can present the information to the user at the right time. So instead of having people type in groups, let's look it up in Okta. So if we go to choosing Okta groups, so go to the OIDC section. So after user_-in_ID token, go ahead and add a new line. Put in the word type, TYPE, : space Okta. Okay. Now, before we go ahead and roll this out, log into Okta. We're going to do a couple things.
All right. Where's my Okta window? All right.
All right. So go to groups. Let's create a couple groups. So create a group called OU-admins. Probably know where we're going with this.
Yeah, let me just double check something just to make sure I called it. Oh, yeah, I got to be careful because I called it OU-admin in the thing.
Yeah.
Actually, here, let me do this. Make it plural. Okay. And then another group.
Create another group called Kate's-admins.
Okay.
And then let's create two more groups to represent a new namespace. So let's call it, ext-admins. And then ext-viewers. All right, go ahead and let's rerun OU control.
Okay. Whoops. What happened?
Oh yeah, we missed one. go back to your values.yaml. It's a nice thing about having a command. It can error check for you.
Okay.
There is a key called use_standard_JIT_workflow. That one. Yep. Change that to false.
That's it?
Yep.
All right. Let's rerun this. Okay. It's working.
You're sharing your code window. Yep. There we go. So what's going on here is we're updating all the YAML, right? Mm-hmm. Everything's getting updated. But what's going to be really cool about this is a couple of things. One, let's say you onboard a Concha as a user. You add her to the Kate's admins group. And when she logs in, she's a Kate's admin for that local cluster. Mm-hmm. Right? So there is no request process. At the same time, because we know how to talk to so many different things, we know how to talk to Okta, we know how to talk to GitHub, we know how to talk to LDAP, we know how to talk to Azure AD and Entra. Because we know how to do all those things, we take a lot of that like glue work, right? So, instead of you as the portal owner having to write code that says, okay, I'm going to call the Okta API to list out all the groups, mm-hmm. We do that, right? And it's not just that we do that. We keep the libraries updated and patched. Mm-hmm. We have automated testing. Mm-hmm. We have automated integrations with all sorts of different things. So, it's more than just, oh, we already wrote the code to do that. It's that we're keeping that code up to date, right? We're keeping those systems up to date. Every time we do a release, we're doing backwards compatibility testing and regression testing to make sure we didn't break something.
Nothing.
Yeah.
All the maintenance is done.
Yep. And that's something that, when you're doing a build versus buy discussion, a lot of folks just forget about that part, right? Like, oh, I built the cool thing. The cool thing runs. Cool. Like Okta is a great example. Okta has changed its Java API. They're on version 15. Their API has only existed for like 6 years. Do you want to have to change your API, every 6 months because Okta decided to? So, okay, cool. So we're all done. So Marino, you should be able to log in.
All right, let me see. Where's my incognito window? Yeah, okay, that's nice. The session timed out on me, and I love that.
Yeah, because we actually killed OpenUnison, restarted.
All right. Super secret password. Oh, that's not fun.
Really secret password.
Oh, hold on. No, I'm using the wrong account here. 8SOU.nip.io. What?
Are you, you're an incognito, yeah. Yeah, you just gotta verify the password for KubeHuddle.
Oh, I keep putting in the wrong password. That's my own fault.
Usually is, Marino.
There was only some sort of key management system that existed.
We're not going to have much time for that. All right, so click on New Kubernetes Namespace.
All right.
We're going to have a few new options. Oh, shoot. Nope, we forgot a step. Go back to Okta as an admin.
All right, I am in Okta. Let me just reshare my screen again because I keep asking StreamYard to, do us a solid, and they haven't come through yet.
Yeah, they're kind of jerks. So what we now need to do is we need to be able to talk to Okta with the API. Yep. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is go to security.
Okay.
And then it's been a while since. Is there one called tokens? It'd be easier if I look on mine instead of trying to squint at yours.
There's oh, I can make it bigger. Oop, wrong one.
Login.
API maybe?
Uh,
Tokens, yeah. There's a token
Yep.
section.
Okay, so click on tokens. Click on create a token. Call it OpenUnison. Copy it, put it in a safe place. All right, so now go back to your kube control. We're going to add a secret in the OpenUnison namespace.
And what I'm going to do is, you saw the process of creating a token, so I'm going to create a new token so y'all don't try to hack my cluster here or anything.
Well, it's not your cluster really. It would be your it'd be your Okta account.
All right.
But you're going to create a key. So there's a secret called Orchestra Secret Source.
1 second. So it's under the OpenUnison. Okay.
Yep. So there's a secret called Orchestra Secret Source.
You seeing it?
Yep.
Right here. Okay. Oh, right
yep.
here. Okay.
So go ahead and edit that. Really? That's a safe place, Marino?
Why did that not work?
Kube control, because you did Open-Unison.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. There we go. All right.
All right. So you're going to add a key called Okta _ token, all caps.
Where is that?
I just sent it to you in the private chat under data. And don't forget to base 64 it. And you man, stop sharing once you show.
Yeah.
But you want it in the data section.
1 second. Oh.
Yep.
All right.
And then go ahead and stop sharing. And remember to base 64 and code it.
1 second. Oops. Dang it. Just give me 1 second here. I'm trying to avoid creating a file here, so I'm just trying to remember the right echo command.
Echo-N.
Yeah, there we go.
That's been burned into my memory.
Echo.
Years of pain and suffering. I swear I put the right value in the secret.
Echo-N base 60, pipe base 64. Got it. Okay, perfect. Okay, and then I'm going to drop it into. Dang it. Okay. Done. Edited. And let me reshare my screen again.
So we're going to run OU control one more time.
Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. Cool. This one right here?
Yep. So what we just did was we generated a token so that OpenUnison can talk to the Okta API on your behalf. This way, we're able to pull those groups in. So when you clicked on new namespace, it was hanging. Probably, if we looked at the logs, it was because Okta was complaining. I don't know who you are. Give me a token. And we couldn't just update the Helm charts because what the operator does in this instance is it takes the values from Orchestra secret source, puts it into a it's not an environment variable in Java. It's called a system property that is then accessible easily. So this makes that kind of easy.
Okay.
So we're just waiting for OpenUnison to settle. And all that discussion of Thai food for lunch is now getting
Yeah.
There we go. It's amazing. It takes forever for Java to die. There's probably a really good legacy joke in there somewhere.
You don't want to piss off the Java friends that we have. They're probably going to enter the chat.
Oh, I'm the Java super friend, right? Like this thing is all Java, so I am the Java friend. Sometimes Java isn't my friend, but I'm always Java's friend.
Yeah.
I forget, when you deployed this cluster, was it Talos or was it K3s?
It's K3s.
K3s?
Yeah, I tried to do some things with the Talos cluster on Cibo, and so the thing is you can't mess around with anything in the kernel, right? You can't do anything IP tables. You literally can't mess around with network settings post installation. That's the biggest challenge that I have with Talos at the moment, because ambient mesh, for example, doesn't work on Talos because of the rewrites of IP tables. Yeah. I tried this like a year ago, and there's still I have an open PR somewhere, an open issue somewhere, I should say. But anyways, all right. So this
should be able to log in again. So let's try this again once more with feeling.
All right. Let me reconnect to Kate's OU, and I gotta share my screen. Okay.
All right. Oh, okay. So it did work. So go ahead and click on new Kubernetes namespace again. So you'll see we have a couple of extra fields here, right? Oh, wait a minute. Cluster. Where are the groups? Internal access groups are enabled. That's weird. Why didn't it list out the
actual groups?
That refresh. Yeah. Well, no. It should list out. Go to your logs. I wonder if something didn't.
Logs on the.
OpenUnison dash orchestra.
One second.
So it's the OpenUnison dash orchestra. It's the last one. Scroll up. See if there are any errors or anything. Interesting. I don't see any. Strange. Oh, wait. No, there we go. Scroll down. Keep going. Keep going. I'm looking for the word exception, capital E, if you want to.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't see any exceptions here.
I saw one. I saw a stack trace, which means there's an exception to go with it.
There's a warn.
Oh, there we go. All right. So what did not come in? TremoloSecurity. Class not found. com.tremolosecurity.activemq.choose AMQ. Interesting. Let me see your OpenUnison values.
1 second.
I wonder if it's hard coded to a specific tag because we're messing with something. Look for the word image. No, keep going. No. Oh, that's why we're on a beta. Go ahead and just delete line 26 entirely.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and run OU control one more time to see if it works. And then if it doesn't work, we can always debug and come back later. I've been at this for 2 hours. I want to be somewhat respectful of our viewers' time. Well, I don't know. We keep getting more viewers, so we haven't scared anybody off or everybody off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this should, at this point, work, right? Yeah, I don't see anything preventing.
Please work.
Don't need to sign into Okta at the moment.
Did I break something? Helm chart. Clustering management templates. Or coil. No.
We have our Kubernetes 10-year party next week in Toronto.
Oh, we have day after tomorrow.
Yeah. I wanted to.
Ours is on Tuesday in DC, yeah.
Nice. We wanted to do it today. It's just we couldn't find a proper venue to support us for this Thursday. But yeah, I'm eyeing the clock and waiting for that first commit to roll around 10 years ago. Could you imagine there's like some, random massive reversion because like suddenly Kubernetes hits 10 years old and it's like, okay, well, time to roll back and regress a bunch of changes that have been made and everything breaks all of a sudden.
Well, what was the Kubernetes Twitter account got locked.
No,
because-
Oh yeah.
because they changed the date, the age.
They changed the date
Yeah.
to make it 10 years old.
Yeah.
There's definitely a
Funny,
joke in
though.
there about being a senior. You don't. You're not a senior at your job unless you've locked everything out of Twitter at least once. All right. Looks like we're almost there. So the Okta target got created. All right, give it a try. Go ahead and log in.
Stop screen, present your screen. All right.
All right.
We're-
Let's try a new Kubernetes namespace.
Nope.
No, why aren't the roles popping up? That's weird. Do me a favor.
Mhm.
Let's try this. Maybe debug it for a quick second. Go to /new project /main /config register /config. No main.
No main. Okay.
No main. Yeah. All right. Yeah, so I can see that they're popping up. So it's loading the groups. I wonder if there's something in the... Click on the pretty print.
Click on the what?
And on the very top, there's a little checkbox that says pretty print because it sees that it's JSON. There we go. So yeah, so we can see it's pulling the groups in.
Yeah, X admins,
Yeah.
Kate's admins, yeah, OU admins. Okay, yeah, I see it all.
And then again...
Is it just
So
not
we've
rendering on the front end, I guess, or?
Yeah, if we do, go back to the namespace screen. Yep, and click on developer tools. And then go to console. Failed to load resource. No, that's fine. Access to internal resource. That's okay. Oh, here we go. No, that's actually not that big of a deal. Failed to load Oh! Go into OpenUnison namespace.
Yeah.
There's going to be a pod called OU HTML, something like that.
OU HTML, yeah.
Yeah, delete that pod. Might be one other thing we need to do, and it might be a bug in our directions that's breaking this.
Okay. It's deleted.
Once it's running again, go ahead and hit refresh. Let's see if that fixes it.
Nope.
Okay. Let me try one more thing. No. Go to your values.yaml.
Okay.
Can you share it real quick?
Oh, sure. 1 second. Okay.
All right. Look for the word functions. No.
Nope.
All right. Let me see here. No, it wouldn't be in there. I need to go to the Helm charts. It would be an orchestral login portal. Templates, infrastructure, HTML. Register functions.
All right. I think to be a little considerate of our viewers,
Yeah.
let's possibly debug this offline. Doesn't seem like we're able to get to a point where we can see what we're hoping to see with the groups here. And then maybe on our next stream, we could just take a look back at it again and see how that all works. We'll probably have to just do some redeployment behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we saw quite a lot today. We actually dug into the whole concept of namespace as a service through OpenUnison, and it was actually just some configurations and modifications of our YAML file, our values file, to just enable MariaDB, and then disable or create a fake SNTP black hole, so that effectively, whenever we're trying to create a namespace as an end user, we can see the requests come in and approve it as necessary, and then we'll have the necessary boundaries to go out and deploy our applications. So great stuff around multi-tenancy and just giving folks thoughts around and even ideas around how they can implement this within their own environments, because it's likely that you're just kubectl create namespace and then saying, hey, here you go, developer, it's on your own, you're on your own now. So Marc, any final thoughts that you want to share?
Everything you saw today is open source, so please give it a go. Love to chat with folks. Please open up issues on GitHub. We'll be responsive. Of course, looking forward to talking to everybody next time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And we will have one more live stream coming up soon. We'll announce it and share some details about that very soon. But again, thank you all for coming. Akansha, thank you for the brilliant questions. And Marc, as always, thank you for your expertise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.